Hi, welcome to the Howling Hour podcast. I'm your host, Chris Staten. You can find me on Twitter at pilgrim_NE, and you can find the show on Twitter and Instagram at the Howling Hour _. Back with me today is Chris Leonetti.
Oh, hey. Hey, everyone.
And today we're going to be talking about the 1999 found footage supernatural horror film, The Blair Witch Project. Starring Heather Donahue, Michael C. Williams, and Joshua Leonard. Directed by Daniel Merrick and Eduardo Sanchez. Yeah, so this movie, everyone knows this movie. I don't really have to go too much into what this movie is. I feel like you guys know it. And it's because it is
One of the most iconic horror films of all time.
seriously, yeah, because it didn't reinvent the genre, but it added so much to the genre. Because horror films in general were kind of dipping in the '90s. They weren't as popular. Slashers had by '99, slashers were dead outside of Scream. There were movies like this weren't being made in general at the time. This was a movie made on like a budget of $60,000, maybe less than that. Shot on an original budget of $35,000 to $60,000. The final cost ended up being $200,000 to $750,000 after the post production edits and everything. But this movie was so popular, it made back a shit ton of money. It was the Paranormal Activity of its time. And I think this paved the way for that to come about as well. Anyway, with the use of found footage as the gimmick for the movie, back when people legitimately did believe that Heather, Michael, and Josh were all actually missing and presumed dead or what have you.
Well, it's crazy. It's crazy how they did all that, because you can't do marketing like that now and put
It's
out
hard.
a
It's
movie
much
like
harder.
that. You
Yeah.
And to do it so successfully, like at the beginning, all the interviews with the townspeople and everything, I was like, I watched this, I think, in like 2014 for the first time, because I just didn't watch horror movies until I was a big boy.
Yeah.
And I was like, watching with my now ex-girlfriend at the time. I'm like, these people are fucking dead. Like, holy shit, why isn't anyone talking about this? And you mentioned budget. Their budget was like max 500K, and they made $248 million. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
So it's funny, Jason Blum of Blumhouse, the people who would go on to do the whole Paranormal Activity thing, he was actually approached for this project. If he
Really?
wanted to, like, if they were gonna, if he was, I forget what position he had, but basically he turned it down. But then when Paranormal Activity was coming back around, that's when it was optioned for movies, that they Blumhouse took that and made a big of a success, really. And once again, I think Paranormal Activity obviously really gave birth, in Cloverfield, really gave birth to the found footage subgenre of horror films. But this movie was shot in 8 days.
Really?
Yeah. They literally, one of the cameras that they had, they literally bought it at Circuit City. And when they were done shooting everything they needed within those 8 days, they went and returned it and got their money back for using the camera. They were trying really hard to stay on budget with this stuff. The actors themselves, they were alone in the woods, out in near Burkittsville, Maryland. But oftentimes they weren't really ever too far away from the road. They were usually only a few yards away from the road for a good amount of time. Just the way things are shot, or at least the shots that we get to see in the movie, they are angled well. But the director and people in charge, they kept in close touch with the actors via walkie talkies. so that way they could kind of guide them and direct them to their, the stops they were staying at for different parts of the filming. There was one part though, in the movie where they walk south all day and they end up in the exact same place that they started, the log in the water, and they freak out. That legitimately that was their genuine reactions. They were pissed that they had walked south for what they saw, well, at least what they thought was south for a whole day, and ended up back at the same spot. That was genuine. A lot of genuine moments that come through in the film. Actually, so in the movie as well, the actual bickering and fighting, at times, it seemed like they were ready to start fucking throwing hands with each other. That was real, and that was in part because the director and people, they were trying to get them more frustrated and angry with each other, so they would do things like give them less food each day, to get them more angry and ornery.
Weren't all the tent scares genuine too? I remember reading
Yeah,
that.
so
Somewhere.
the one night where like there's rustling around the tent and they fucking freak out and they run into the darkness, that was unscripted. And so the guy who had the camera behind Heather, when she's running and she's screaming, what the fuck is that? What the fuck is that? In the darkness. Actually, to the left, there was supposed to be in the distance like a woman in a white gown, standing in the woods. Yeah, but the guy who was operating the camera at the time didn't pan left, and so like it was all like so you had like the scene was obviously not reshot because that was a genuine scare on the actors. So you can't really redo that. But still, like I think that scene is particularly still very terrifying. Even although I do think if we captured like a woman standing in a white gown off on the side, that would have been like shit your pants.
I'm
Terrifying.
I'm kind of happy that they didn't, because I
Yeah.
feel like the whole thing with this movie is like
It's pretty reserved.
You don't see the Blair Witch, and that's what's scary. Like all the jump scares and everything at the end, you expect to like have a jump scare to end the movie, kind of like how what's that movie where the demon is in the film that they find in the attic?
Sinister.
Yeah, and the last shot of that movie is like a big jump scare, and I half expected that to happen, and I was like, oh shit, like I don't want to walk in the woods now because I don't know if she's following me. I don't know if the Blair Witch is following me. I used to when I was a kid, one of my neighbors loved horror movies and watched this, and he scared the shit out of me because he's like, oh, if we go in the woods, the Blair Witch is gonna get you. And he kept telling me all this shit like, oh, there's a hut back there, there's sick people in the woods behind your house, and she's just gonna come get you. And I just left a bad taste in my mouth for years and years.
So I had first watched this movie because one of the things that I would do, like a couple of like bonding things with my father when I was younger, involved one, the July 4th Twilight Zone marathon, as well as the AMC horror movie marathon. But he would fall asleep, especially for the AMC horror movie marathon. He'd be passed out in his recliner by like 9 o'clock. And I remember one year, I maybe was like 10 or 11. We were in the basement watching horror movies, and I think like it was like Halloween or like Poltergeist or something. And I was, movies that I had actually probably seen before at that point. But there really hadn't been any horror movies I had seen at that age that really like freaked me the fuck out. And then this movie came on, and I was fucking terrified by the end of it because I legitimately thought that it was real. But even afterwards, still I watched it today on. I own a VHS copy that I purchased last year that I watched on my CRT, and even still, like it's very powerful. It's a very affecting movie. It taps into real human terror. The things that really do terrify us. Watching the breakdown of our three characters throughout the talk of them throughout the the course of the movie is almost as scary as this paranormal threat that looms over them. But yeah, before we talk really much more about the movie, I'll go through the plot here. Not that there's really a whole lot of one. Uh, so, in October 1994, film students Heather, Mike, and Josh set out to produce a documentary about the fabled Blair Witch. They travel to Burkittsville, Maryland, and interview residents about the legend. Locals tell them of Rustin Parr, a hermit who lived in the woods and kidnapped 7 children in the 1940s. He supposedly killed them all in his basement, murdering them in pairs while having one stand in a corner. The students explore the woods in North Burkittsville to research the legend. They meet 2 fishermen, one of whom warns them that the woods are haunted. He tells them of a young girl named Robin Weaver who went missing in 1888. When she returned 3 days later, she talked about an old woman whose feet never touched the ground. The students hike to Coffin Rock, where 5 men were found ritualistically murdered in the 19th century. Their bodies later disappeared. They camp for the night, and the next day find an old cemetery with 7 small cairns, one of which Josh accidentally knocks over. That night, they hear the sounds of twigs snapping. The following day, they try to hike back to the car, but cannot find it before dark and must make camp. They again hear twig snapping. In the morning, they find that 3 cairns have been built around their tent. Heather learns her map is missing. Mike reveals he kicked the map into a creek out of frustration, which provokes a fight between the 3 as they realize they are now lost. They decide to head south, using Mike's compass, and discover stick figures suspended from trees. They again hear strange sounds that night, including children laughing. After an unknown force shakes the tent, they hide in the woods until dawn. Upon returning to their tent, they find that their possessions have been rifled through, and Josh's equipment is covered with slime. They come across a river identical to one they crossed earlier, and realize they have walked in a circle. Josh disappears the next morning, and Heather and Mike try in vain to find him. That night they hear Josh's agonized screams, but are unable to locate him. They theorize that his screams are a fabrication by the witch to draw them out of their tent. The next day, Heather discovers a bundle of sticks tied with fabric from Josh's shirt. Upon opening the bundle, she also finds a blood-soaked scrap of his shirt containing teeth, hair, a finger, and a large piece of a tongue. Although distraught, she does not tell Mike. That night, she records herself apologizing to her family and Mike's and Josh's families, taking responsibility for their predicament. They again hear Josh's agonized cries and follow them to an abandoned house containing demonic symbols and children's bloody handprints on the walls. Trying to find Josh, they go to the basement, where an unforeseen force attacks Mike, causing him to drop his camera. Heather enters the basement screaming, and her camera captures Mike standing in a corner. The unseen force attacks Heather, causing her to drop her camera, and the footage ends. And that's that.
Like, there's... It's just crazy that you don't even see... Like, for me, that's the craziest bit about this. And that they were able to do it successfully. Like, it's one of the most successful... It feels like it's one of the most successful horror films of all time. With a super tiny budget.
Yeah, it is 100%. It's it's like the Evil Dead, right? Once again, horror that's been spawned from the woods, evil that lurks in the woods. Also, the backpack that Josh has. That's I guess all of Josh's stuff gets covered in slime, but that slime actually KY jelly.
Really?
Yep. Yeah, there was. Yeah, I guess that's how you replicate slime. Josh calls it blue jelly shit at some point, I think. They talked about as well though in the synopsis about the demonic symbols in the house. So most of that it's Futhark runes, and they're like reversed, which means that it implies a dark or negative fate for the person who reads them, I guess. There's another kind of it's like Hebronic or Hebraic. It's like ancient, even before like Hebrew um, was like developed. It's like ancient Hebrew symbols that were used in that house as well. They shot a couple different endings.
Really?
Yeah, they really like didn't have much of a budget, but like so when it came time to do the ending, um, they went with that. That was like the one that we see is the one that they initially wanted to
Yeah.
go with. But they were given a little bit more. The budget was boosted a little bit so that they could try some different endings to see what worked. There's one with like Mike being crucified on like one of those like big stick figure things called the Chewbacca, by the way. That's what those things are called. And another one where he's being hanged from a noose from like the rafters or whatever. But because that's why they went back. So ended up settling on the ending that we see, and they just added in that interview snippet with the guy who talked about like Rustin Parr making one looking to the corner while he killed the other one, kind of thing. So and then it all kind of just ties together, and that's what we get. I feel bad. Heather Donahue, the woman who plays Heather, obviously, she had a hard time finding more acting roles.
Oh, I'm sure. I was just gonna ask, like, what are they
Yeah.
all doing now? But after
Heather,
that,
she actually works in cannabis now. She got into
nice,
growing and
nice.
stuff back
Live,
in '08.
live,
Really.
laugh, love.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I think very early on in the movie, it talks about like she asks if anyone has any weed. Actually, um, the longest actually snippet of the entire movie coming from those hotel parts. It was like it was like 90 straight minutes of uncut footage. That actually it contained an argument between Josh and Heather. Who initially actually in the movie Mike and Heather are the ones that are supposed to be kind of antagonistic to one another, and they cut it that way. So it's still that's what you get. But in actuality, what you don't see on the film and all the stuff they left on the cutting room floor is that Josh and Heather were arguing the most between the three. And what I guess is a good thing that they ended up cutting the film the way they cut it, because also initially they wanted to write as Josh as being some kind of like romantic figure for Heather, like to be really into her. Yeah. So well, in the 2016 Blair Witch or whatever.
That's the Blair Witch 2, right?
Well, there's two, which is the Book of Shadows, and then there's Blair Witch, and then they have the game or whatever, and all the other
Oh, there's a game.
miscellaneous. Yeah, this is a game, which also is. I honestly don't know. I heard it was actually kind of a scary experience, but it really doesn't. Not don't buy it. Don't buy it if you can, get it for free or something like that.
89. Holy shit! It's $50 on eBay. At GameStop for an Xbox One, it's $19. 89% of users like the game.
Yeah, I heard like overall it was like actually a pretty spooky experience.
It just looks like it plays probably like Slenderman does.
Probably, honestly, I think it does. I think I heard that's how it kind of works. You're going around collecting stuff, and you're basically just picking up lore and learning more lore. Cause that's what people do.
Oh shit!
They thirst for it.
There's like a villain though, and you see.
Oh, is there?
Yeah, he's like this. Have you see shit? What's it called? You see the fourth Pirates of the Caribbean movie?
Yes.
You know Javier Bardem's character?
Yes.
It looks like him.
Okay.
Yeah, it literally looks like him, but with branches and shit. Yeah, it's definitely just like, oh, you can play it on Oculus.
Oculus, now owned by Meta entirely. Yeah.
But back to the movie.
Yeah, anyway, back to the movie. So, To help maintain the film's fear factor, all three of the actors agreed to stay in character like the whole time. But if you needed to take a break, you had to say the safety word. But then before it could actually you could actually kind of stop having to be in character, the other two actors would also have to say the safety word, and the safety word was taco. One of the times, so one of the times that they needed to, the safety word wasn't used. Like the director had to just go and break up a fight between Heather and Josh, because they were, I guess, in a really heated argument, and it was about to escalate, and so they got in there to kind of break it up. Um,
Well,
so once again,
they're spending the whole movie just arguing with
yeah,
each other
yeah,
and
and
screaming.
so how they ended up cutting it is, so they basically waited for later in the movie once Josh kind of starts turning on Heather as well, or has some arguments with Heather, because that's how they wanted to frame it, to kind of have it as like, the guys are ganging up on Heather. So, but they couldn't go. They had to like basically cut around the arguments that the two of them had earlier on in the movie until that became more pertinent. I really do think it's super fucked up what Mike did, kicking the map into the river. Like, I don't even understand on what planet, like how deranged or like desperate you have to be to throw that into the
I
river, to kick it
yeah,
into the river.
I mean it like in movie probably taking a lot out on the character and all that shit, but how far away were they from like a road? I just find it hard to believe that you're stumbling around for like hours and you don't find a road. I I don't know. That's
Well,
just me.
that's the magic of it, right? That's
That's
because
Hollywood.
once Josh knocked over the cairn, the little pile of rocks at that kind of burial site, or wherever or whatever that was. Like he and the group like are now marked basically, to be kind of taken out by the Blair Witch and the dark magic in that forest. And so that's why I think like they I think that's why they walk for a straight day, and you just come across, they walk south for a whole day and they come back to the point where they started. I think it's a lot of that, where like there's a lot of spatial changes, anomalies that have them keeps them lost basically, from the rest of the world. Um, but yeah, I mean, even then, right? They're wandering for a while, and then they end up finding the house out there, and towards the end of the movie, it's like they are pushed to the brink, and then they are basically led like lamb to the slaughter into this house.
I what would you do if you're in that situation? At the end, you see the house and your best pal is screaming from inside the house.
Well, they didn't even really know Mike.
Oh, really? I
They
thought.
hired Mike for the job.
Oh, I get him and Joshua confused.
No,
Because
yeah,
Heather
like
and Josh
Heather,
knew each other, right?
Heather and Josh are, yeah, because they know each other from school. They're
Yeah.
students together. This is like their project. And
Oh,
Mike, I
these.
don't know if Mike was also from their school, or like took out like an ad or something.
There's always
But yeah, they
one.
just met Mike
There's
for this
always
project.
that one character in the movies like this. I don't. Have you seen the new Paranormal Activity?
No, I have not.
There's like the oh, this is the person I hired to help film the movie.
Really? Is that
Yeah.
really what they're doing then? Yeah.
Yeah, they literally it's if to go off on like a side note, the new Paranormal Activity, I think it's on like Amazon Prime or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty good until the end. But yeah, they hired this random ass bro, this random ass pothead to help film their documentary.
Interesting. Um,
But yeah, what would you do? Your buddy is in Colby is trapped inside
yeah,
of that house, and you hear him screaming.
I'd probably go in. You know, at that point, because I forget how many nights exactly they're out in the woods. It's like 5 or 6 nights um, for the whole movie. But like, I gotta imagine I'd be so just fucking just pushed to the brink that I would probably go in. Um, Maybe not be like Mike and just fucking feel like I hear him downstairs and just fucking thunder off. I would definitely be more cautious than all that. I think, but got to do what you got to do. So when when Josh is taken from the group, Heather and Mike, their actors were unaware that Josh was going to disappear near the end of like the shoot that they were doing, because originally Mike's character is supposed to disappear, but the directors left a note for Josh instructing him to wait for the other two to go to sleep, and then to leave the tent. And then they had to wait for like 45 minutes before, getting to him and being able to call him and tell him that your character's dead. And the actor was actually pretty happy about the whole situation because there was a Jane's Addiction concert that he wanted to go to that he had time to go to now, which I think is very on par for really all of their characters.
Yeah, right.
This is so just fucking like kind of 90s art school, this kind of grunge kid vibe.
That's
all over this.
So funny. Oh, bro, I gotta get to Jane's Addiction tonight. Sick, man.
One line I love from this movie. It's kind of early on, like once trouble first kind of starts surfacing. But it's something to the effect that Mike says. It's something to the effect of like, we're not making this isn't a documentary about us getting lost. It's a documentary about a witch. And I was just like, I like there's little pieces of dialogue like that, because really what the Blair Witch Project ends up being is a documentary about them going missing. It's as much as it ends up being about the witch. Like you said, we don't see her. We not see her once. But like early on, when the interviews with the townspeople, also the townspeople that they interviewed were hired by the director to do the interviews, unbeknownst to the actors.
I was gonna say they didn't know.
Yeah, so they were interviewing them, and they didn't know that. Like, so they completely, as well, the entire lore, the mythos of the Blair Witch. The actors legitimately thought, the mythos was real, obviously fictional, but that the mythos existed. And so when they're going down to Burkittsville and hearing these people tell their stories, like their facial reactions and everything are genuine, which I find really great, actually. That knowing that it's authentic, and it still came out so well. Also, these townspeople interviews, kind of harkening back to last week's episode on Night of the Demon, which featured interviews with townsfolks about a local legend or myth, which in and of itself goes back to movies like The Legend of Boggy Creek and things of that nature. I think today it continues to be an undervalued resource in some movies like this, especially movies that try to style themselves as documentaries. Like being able to get like pretty authentic local interviews is pretty good. I know like they had interviews in like The Fourth Kind. They had interviews in oh my god, it's a more recent movie that it's escaping me now. I guess it's not recent, 2007, but the Poughkeepsie tapes, those as well being in part, quote unquote real footage spliced with documentary stuff or recreations. And I don't know. I kind of forgot where I was going with all of that, but
I'd be so.
Oh, the interviews, yeah. It's just like it's very very powerful, very effective, and I think all the movies I just listed do a very good job of utilizing interviews.
I feel like I'd get there and be like, no, wait, really? Like, no, and then like, how many times? I wonder if they all tried to like leave, if it was getting like too real.
I don't think so. I probably would have. It probably would have come up somewhere if someone had actually tried to leave the shoot before it was over, because like they did have a safety word. Like there was, as frustrating as it was going to be, like they had all agreed up front that basically creatively, you know, the director and people could kind of do whatever, could
Yeah.
mess with them and everything. So they knew up front that they were going to be messed with. Obviously, you know, you're still getting messed with, so it's still going to piss you off, but it's not as serious as you might think. Although initially, Heather Donahue, the first thing that she had said to like the director when she got to set was like, "All right, so is this like a snuff film, or like this isn't a snuff film, right?" or something along those lines. Um, she brought a knife with her anyway because she wasn't comfortable, you know, sleeping out in the woods with like just two dudes.
Really?
Yeah,
Makes sense.
which makes complete sense. Fuck, I would have had a knife anyway, just you know, in case. I mean, it did seem a little bit late in the season, but it did kind of, you know, if an animal had to come up and want to fight or some shit, you know, protect yourself. I don't know what like the coyote population's like in Burkittsville, Maryland.
I'm sure it's high.
Yeah. Also, the town Burkittsville itself. There was the town sign that you see like in the opening shots of the movie. That was stolen several times.
Oh, I'm sure.
Once actually on like the opening night of the movie itself. The town actually of Burkittsville, because they were getting like such a flood of tourists, that they were that were being kind of destructive in all honesty.
That's
so
shitty.
they didn't even show the movie in like their local theater, which is kind of a bummer. The house, you know, the house that they go to is like 50 miles north of the town. Actually, they were a completely different location in the woods than where, you know, the rest of the movie was shot, or I think, you know, but there was people trespassing there. I think there's a music video shot there for some music artist, or some shit like that.
It's a mumble rapper is just sitting on the roof of
Oh
the
yeah,
house.
I have no idea. That'd be so funny. I could see that. Well, definitely, it probably wasn't. It definitely wasn't a mumble rap artist because the house has since been demolished, I think. But you know, initially they were gonna, you know, demolish it basically the year after, well, in '99 when the film released, because of like people going there and like disturbing what is already like a decomposing spot, just to get like souvenirs and from the location and shit like that. There was like kind of a fans kind of came up and like raised money and like to spread awareness and try to stop it from being torn down, and it lasted for like a few months probably, because it was torn down the next year in 2000.
They're trying to make it a historical landmark.
Yeah, they tried making like a historical landmark, which like, I mean, I feel like if the house wasn't going to be torn down like immediately after this film came out, and instead like it was going to be torn down now or maybe even like 5 years ago, people, you may have been able to successfully been like, yeah, look, you look at what the Blair Witch Project was, look at what it did, you know, how much it's influenced film, not just horrors, but like film in general, all this stuff. Maybe then it would have been successful, but definitely not like as soon as like this movie was coming out and it was like blowing up, because you can just simply hand wave that as being just like a fad, passing fans, yada yada yada.
So
what do you?
No,
Okay,
you go.
I was going to ask you. So, what do you think of Heather's apology scene?
I don't know. I didn't really like it that much. I thought it was very obviously like I thought it was very disingenuous. Disingenuous, does that make sense?
Yeah, I got you.
I didn't feel like it fit, you know? Does that make sense?
I guess. I mean, I feel like the cut from where the movie was previously to that moment. I think it's like Mike eating a leaf, and then it cuts to that like later that night when she's recording, and it's just like it's a very sharp change in the tone, and I think that's probably just comes down to the editing of the movie. I don't think it's definitely something that doesn't belong there, because you know, at a certain point, you know, in these situations, if you have the means, you know, you might record like an apology or like a last will and testament.
Oh wait, whoa, wait. This is when she's at the end, like right before the end, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I thought that's not an apology. I thought that was like her. Oh wait, she was sobbing into the camera with all the snot and shit.
Yeah, she's like, no
Yep.
matter what, like Mike says from here on out, like
Uh-huh.
I know it's my fault. All this
Yep.
stuff. There's no one else's fault but
I
mine. All this stuff.
I redact. Let's put a strike through everything that I just said. I thought I thought that was good. I thought it was good. I did like the editing. I do stand by that. I don't think like the cut to that really fit. Um, but I think everything that like led up to that, like that's when you're like, oh, shit's gonna go down, and
Yeah.
everything. And like we are at the end of this. We are going to probably not see these guys through this.
Yeah, like that's when you really know.
Yep. That's when I thought it got scary.
Like once like, slowly throughout the movie, once they're really getting their psyches are really being beaten down, torn
Yep.
down.
Yep.
Like they all kind of come to accept their circumstance and make their peace with it. It's just Heather's the one that has the camera with her all the time, because as she says, it's all she fucking has left. And it or as Josh said when he was looking through it, it helps make everything not real. It's not quite real. So I think recording the apology, I do love the spoof of it in Scary Movie, with like the snot bubbles and everything.
I just
But, yeah.
recently watched that actually. That's a good one.
Yeah, it's good. I actually rewatched. Well, no, I watched for the first time Scary Movie 5, and actually it was actually really good.
Really?
Yeah, for some reason I really enjoyed it. I'd say most of the scary movies are actually funny to some extent. The fourth one not really being that funny to me,
Yeah, I didn't.
but like the fifth, it'd probably go like quick like digression here. Scary movies. I'd probably put 2 and then 1 and then 3 and then 5 and then 4 if I was gonna rank them. But like, I think 5. I think I'd still give 5 like a 6.5, 7 out of 10. 2 is just incredibly good.
2 is, oh my god, Mac Miller is in this
Yeah, Mac Miller's in number 5, baby. Rest in peace.
with Ashley Tisdale. Oh my god.
Yeah,
I gotta watch
movie
this.
is, as all scary movies, it is 100% a product of its time in many ways.
Oh god.
Yeah. So, do you have any notes that you wanna touch on?
Out of, what do you think? I think one of the things that stands out to me, like obviously, like I'd say this is, like, it might be overkill to call it a masterpiece. Like a step below that, I don't think I have a lot of complaints. Whereas like when we talked about Krampus, Prom Night, Killer Clowns, all that, like they're
Oh yeah, we've really touched on some not
we've
so good
really,
movies.
We've really spent a great deal of time like complaining about certain parts of the movie, which is like what we do. You watch a movie and you're like, oh, like I didn't like that. I can complain about anything. But I actually can't think of anything that I didn't particularly like about this. I think I mentioned the cuts. Some of the cuts are sudden, but that's what you get for like this type of movie, like this documentary type thing, especially in like the 90s and stuff. But overall, I don't think there's anything that I can really critique it on. I think it does suck where you have this really good movie and then you have all of the sequels that came after it that have just been shit. And it's like, kind of, what went wrong? Why couldn't we leave this alone?
Yeah, I think that's a trap that a lot of franchises fall into. Like, I don't even know. I think there's like 20 something Amityville horror movies out there, and like how many of them are good? 2, maybe 3. Like, I don't even fucking know. Like there's some franchises that were not meant to be franchises. I think the Blair Witch is one of them. But the thing is like, especially now, or at least the research in 2016, right? You know, that was coming out at a time where the people who saw it when they maybe saw it in theaters, you know, they're older now. They're you know, adults with kids probably, and it's just made by probably I honestly don't know too much about the production of it, but probably made by people who saw the original Blair Witch in a theater, like understood the hype, and it's just really like the power of nostalgia there, where it's just like, you know, this is still scary. There's still something here. There might still be a story to tell that's compelling and interesting and terrifying. But I just don't think the Blair Witch, you know, there was a lore to it. You know, like there's like you had the Curse of the Blair Witch, which was like it aired on the Sci-Fi Channel a few months before the actual movie released, and it was basically going into some of the background of the lore of you know, the disappearance of these kids, of the Blair Witch, of Burkittsville, all this stuff. And I just don't really, and then with the movie itself, and outside of that, I don't really think there needs to be a whole lot of lore. Like it's not that compelling. It's not that interesting. What we're given is effective within the movie that we watch, but anything outside of that is you're just stroking yourself at that point. You know,
So,
it's hard to make a project afterwards that's gonna be able to maintain that same balance.
So what didn't you like about it?
This movie, um, I'd say upon watching it more than once or twice, and I've probably seen this movie over 10 times, probably. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before. I actually saw this was a double feature of this and Scream at a drive-in. Um, but I think upon multiple viewings, all the argument scenes, they just get really, really drawn out. You know, it's just really just high pitched screaming at each other. Like, you know, on multiple viewings, you try to make out what each person is saying in every single argument when there's like all three of them talking at once or whatever. Um, it really, you know, once the illusion is completely peeled back, like there is no more mystery to anything within the movie. It really just comes down to like you're just watching some people stomp around out in the fucking woods and yell at each other for, you know, an hour and 20 minutes. I still think there are still some parts of this, I still think the movie is good. I don't dislike watching it when I watch it, but you know, I see it
I
now
agree.
I see it now for the beauty within each piece, because watching it as a whole together, it does not affect me or hit me in the same way, as it, you know, may have when I was in high school or middle
Yeah,
school.
you definitely can't like watch this, I feel like, more than once in a year, you know? Because it, like you said, if like rewatching this, it is just people arguing to a certain extent.
Yeah, 100%. Um, it's that's where a lot of the tension comes from. A lot of the tension that we see in the movie comes from the characters' relationships with one another, their relationships with their environment, and then this kind of not so tangible supernatural aspect that we never really see on screen. You know,
Yeah.
that there is that tension there, but it's an invisible tension. The stuff that we see that moves the story forward, really is the characters interacting with one another. And after 13 minutes into the movie, you know, we only have these characters. There are no other characters on screen after that point in the film. So you gotta have, you know, a compelling narrative, compelling conflict, or at the very least acting like it's compelling, which I think the actors do a good job of that. Like it's not, you know, people yelling at each other for no reason. Like you can clearly tell these people, like once you find out that, you know, they really were kind of provoked to argue with each other, and like they were basically made miserable by like the production team in order to keep themselves miserable, so that way they would fight, you know, more. uh, I think all of that makes the movie even more enjoyable, being like, yeah, she's really like, they're really pissed off in this moment, aren't they? For whatever reason. Um, but yeah, I that's really my only big gripe, I'd say, for the
I
movie.
agree. I think that's fair.
I think everything else is done incredibly well. Um, kind of just really across the board. The very first cut of this movie was like 2.5 hours or like 2 hours and 45 minutes or some shit. And very, very long, like basically twice as long as what we end up getting in this movie. Which I find very, very interesting. I definitely would have loved to see a longer cut of this movie. I do think on some like DVD editions or whatever releases, they have like extra footage and scenes and shit that didn't make it into the original film. I've never seen those. I think I think the alternate endings are out there as well.
So
I want to say actually, I want to say I actually watched them in college at some point. Once I found out that there were alternate endings to that movie, I was just like, "Oh fuck, let me check them out." But like, I don't have a very clear memory. College is kind of hazy for me at this point.
yeah,
I drank a lot in college.
love that alcohol.
I'm like, did I do that? I have no idea.
Um, yeah, I feel like at some point I've seen like different. I feel like every time I watch it, the ending is a different version.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't know if that's just me misremembering each time I watch it, but
It
to
might
me,
be because I'm pretty sure the movie is not like not even on TVs are different endings.
Oh, I'm completely agree with you, but I feel like every time I'm like, is that the same scene as when I watched it 2 years ago? Is that the same when I first saw it?
Well, I mean the ending is one of the most I think it's one of the most iconic endings in horror. Is the because she has the Heather has like the really big the black and white camera. I forget what it's if it's is it the DAT or something like that or DAP. I have no fucking clue. I don't know film terms or cameras. But so she's carrying that one, and so you're hearing her screams through the regular kind of camera that Mike has, and so it's like this echoed screaming. And she's walking down the stairs, and it's black and white, and she turns a corner, and Mike's just fucking the way he's just standing, like shit, like rounded shoulders, head down, like absolutely fucking transfixed
I would have
into
dipped.
that one spot, and her screams just kind of crescendo, and it's
It's very genuine. It was a very
it's-
genuine response.
yeah. Well, there were times when they would do some of those scenes, especially the endings. There,
Yeah,
they would do those scenes, and like Heather would be fucked up for like a while after doing those scenes. Like she would need to like take a beat and like get some tissues, take some deep breaths, take a break.
Therapy.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're forcing yourself into like these extreme situations just because you're cognizant of the fact that you know what you're doing and everything. It doesn't mean your body is not gonna respond in such a carnal manner. Yeah, but I think I am just about out of
I think
of thoughts on this.
I
If you want
think
to
we
move
covered.
into
I think we covered it.
okay, all right.
This
so
is
I'll
this is the first time where we haven't spent.
like an hour just shitting on a movie or me going. I mentioned this to you before we started recording. This is the first time where we've kind of come into this having the same opinion of a movie, and I haven't been like, oh, I love this movie, and by the end I'm like, oh, this is a piece of shit.
Yeah, I was so funny because like usually with everyone I've had on the show multiple times, like I mean on the show in general, most of the time it's me agreeing with the co-host on the movie that we covered. But yeah, when you brought that up, I was just like, yeah, because we've done Killer Clowns from Outer Space, we've done Terror Train, in prom night, right?
We did. We didn't do Terror Train. We did Compass.
Krampus, that's what it was. That's what it was. Terror Train, another Jamie Lee Curtis horror film. That's why. I think I mentioned that in our prom night filming. But yeah. So definitely movies where we have differed on opinion. But yeah, so I'm gonna go into some closing thoughts. We can slap our ratings on this bad boy. So I really like the Blair Witch Project. It is one of the first horror movies I ever saw that really fucked me up. That stuck with me. That made me afraid of the dark. Because I think what this movie does is, as we've said, you don't get to see the Blair Witch. You don't get to see the terrifying things. Even when it was supposed to be scripted in the movie that we were supposed to see something, and we don't see that woman standing in the white gown. I do think it's still an incredibly effective film. It creates this visceral reaction within you as you watch it. As I think the characters, I think the actors all play very well off of one another, even when they're bickering. I think all of that is, it is so organic, but it's still. I guess the pieces that we see that get cut for the film or put in for the film, those are the interesting bits, and I think. I think it's great. I do like the fact that this movie is shorter, as much as I would like to probably see a little bit more. I think if this movie was even over 90 minutes, I feel like it would probably be overstaying its welcome, because like I did say, some of a good chunk of the movie is just the three of them walking around in the woods and yelling at each other about shit, and then breaking down once they realize that they're lost and they're probably going to die. But even then, within those moments, once they've kind of calmed down and are trying to be rational and are trying to maybe even kind of just taking care of one another, it is very moving. It's very effective storytelling. The ending, like I said before, is amazing. I think it's a truly chilling ending. I like to pretend that everything that came after this movie does not exist, because that stuff leaves a bad taste in my mouth. But I highly recommend checking out this movie if you've not already. And apparently the game is good, so if you've played the game, let me know when I drop this on Instagram or on Twitter. If you've played through the Blair Witch game, drop a comment. I'd love to hear thoughts on it, because I really have never met someone who's played that game, but I had heard good things. And so I will give the Blair Witch Project 3.5 owls.
Ooh. Okay. I echo all of your comments. This has been a movie, before I watched it, that scared me as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult. Just because, like I said, my shitty neighbor terrified me with Tales of the Blair Witch as a kid. And I think if you haven't seen this movie, you're really missing out on a movie that defined pretty much a subgenre of horror, and you can see it in all these other movies that have come out in this century. Blair Witch had an impact on that, and I think you're really missing out if you haven't seen it and you're liking movies like Paranormal Activity. If you love that, then this is definitely a movie for you. I'd give it a 3.5. I think that's really fair. I don't think it's incredible. I think it's super impactful, which is, I think, what makes it a good film.
All right, sweet. As always, I want to thank you all for listening. Looks like this month we'll have a full schedule of episodes, I think. So that's good. I'm currently still on. I'm on the job hunt currently, and I have plans for the last weekend of the month that I had made last summer. So scheduling might get tricky if I need to if I actually do end up getting a job before the end of the month. Fingers crossed. And so no promises, as always. I know I'm terribly inconsistent with doing episodes, even just for going for a full straight month. But I think we should be in the clear here. I want to thank you, Chris, for coming back on the show. As always, it's a pleasure.
I'll be here whenever you want me to be.
So thank you all for listening. Have a good night, and as always, I will see you in the next one. Have a good night.